there! My name is Tori Lupinek, and you are listening to The Unclassical Musician, the podcast empowering the new generation of classical musicians to take risks and live a fulfilling life. Each week, we dive in headfirst into a topic on the minds of young professional musicians and come out the other side with a new perspective on life as an artist. Hello, and welcome back / welcome to The Unclassical Musician. I'm excited for this unique episode format. Today, we're going to be doing a Q&A / Ask Me Anything episode. Haven't done one of these before, but I was looking at my calendar for the show and the guests and the topics that we have coming up, and I had this 1 week that was blank, and I didn't know what to put there, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, let's just open it up. So Q&A / AMA. And this show is kind of in promotion of the Patreon community for The Unclassical Musician. I will not be doing a public Q&A / AMA episode again for the foreseeable future. This is going to be a unique one-time thing. And that is because these are benefits that the members of the online Patreon community of The Unclassical Musician pay for each month. So at the $5 tier, you get to request a topic for an episode, and then you'll get your name read as part of the episode when it airs. And then at the $10 tier, you also get to request episode topics, and you get exclusive access to a monthly private AMA event. And depending how many members we have at the $10 tier, could be a nice and intimate AMA event. So really get to pick my brain once a month. And then finally at the $20 tier, which obviously, you get everything in the $5 tier and everything in the $10 tier. And then in the $20 tier, you also get bonus episodes exclusively just for that $20 tier level. And you also get access to episodes one whole day early. And so that is done exclusively through the Patreon website. So if you want to find out more about how you can support the show and get access to all of this exclusive content, you're going to want to go on www.patreon.com/theunclassicalmusician. Huge shout out to everyone who submitted questions for this episode today. Lots of good ones. Very happy to say that some of these questions are so large that I couldn't possibly do them justice in like a brief Q&A format. So if you did submit a question and we don't cover it on this episode, stay tuned, because that probably means it's going to be covered in an upcoming episode. And so your name will get a shout out on that episode when it does air. So I think I'm just going to go write down this list for today. We'll see how long this episode goes. I don't want it to be longer than an hour, because I don't know if you want to listen to my voice for an hour by myself. So we'll see how deep divey we get into some of these questions today. First up is from my friend Shaina Goodson. Hi, Shaina. She is a trumpet player and trumpet teacher in the Houston area. We teach at a lot of the same schools. She's one of my favorite coworkers, although we don't see each other anymore because we don't go to school and blah. So Shaina asked if I could compare and contrast the region/district band audition process in Texas versus Illinois and the pros and cons of each. I will say that my memory of the region band audition process from when I was a kid is, it's just based on from when I was a kid. So I don't know how accurate it is anymore, But actually the first time I had a region band experience was when I was in junior high. And I was living in Maryland at the time on the Eastern Shore. And so that was called the All Shore Band audition. Don't remember a lot about it. Other than I remember I had to play scales and some kind of piece, not really sure. But that was in the 7th grade. And I do remember being a little bit disappointed that I did not make it into the top group. But that's really all I remember from that. And then in high school, so in the 8th grade, we moved from Maryland to Illinois during the winter break period. So I did fall semester in Maryland and then spring semester of 8th grade in Illinois. So I missed the 8th grade region audition process. So I didn't audition again until my 2nd year of high school, I think, because at the high school that I went to, obviously, they only allowed kids in the top band to audition because they have there's a quota, I guess. You can only submit a certain number of kids to audition for the region process, based on the total population of your school. And my high school was pretty small at that time. I think it was less than 2,000 kids. And everyone was required to be in freshman band at my high school, no matter what level you were playing at. It was kind of remedial freshman band. So I wasn't in the top group at my high school until I was a sophomore. The deal... So right now, the biggest difference between region band / district band auditions in Texas versus in Illinois at the high school level is that in Illinois, you are required to play the scale page, which is one page of 1 octave / 1.5 octave scales in 1 and a 2E and a 3 format. So it's written in 8th notes and 16th notes, not in quarters and 8th notes, like the individual scales are for the region band auditions in Texas. It wasn't all of your majors and your relative minors. I think it was just the easy keys. If there's anyone from Illinois listening to this and I'm making this up, please let me know, because this is just what I remember. I remember that scale page just being drilled into me all the time. I remember there was a test at one point where you had to be able to get through the scale page in under a minute, and you had to be able to single tongue it at 100. And this is 16th notes, right? So I will say that in terms of technique, fundamental technique, you can eliminate a lot of kids based on if they can single tongue at 100. Some of their major and parallel harmonic minor scales, or were they relative? Maybe it was relative minor? I can't remember. So I do think that it is a detriment in Texas that they don't have an advanced scale technique page to make the kids do, because you can really eliminate a lot of people based on that alone. And then the etudes that we had to play are similar to the flute etudes that they use here in Texas. In Illinois, they only do two, a technical one and a lyrical one. So in Texas, there's three etudes, one fast, one slow, and one moderate, but no scales. Also, no sight reading. In Illinois, there's scales, sight reading, and only two etudes, one technical and one lyrical. Again, if it's different, I mean, it might be different now. I'm not sure. But I do know that some of the etudes that I've seen in Texas since moving down here, I have played for a region audition in high school. The actual method of auditioning kids in Texas, like, I don't really know about this. I don't think it's a very awesome process, honestly. And it's also not standardized across the state. So each region and each district and each area does it differently, which I don't think is fair to the kids. Basically, you have all the flutes in one room. And so you could have, like in one of my districts, you can have over 100 flutes in one room. Or they divide the flutes up into 3 rooms, one for each etude. So then it's more manageable, right? There's more like 30 to 40 kids in each room. And so room 1 is the fast etude, room 2 is the moderate etude, room 3 is the lyrical etude. What they'll do is they'll move rooms, or they'll make the kids stay in the same room, and then they'll rotate judges, and then they'll play another etude. It doesn't really make a ton of sense to me, and it makes for a very long process. The way that I remember doing it when I was in high school is we would go to a different school, right? And we would go to different rooms in one hallway. So there would be one room for scales, one room for sight reading, and then one room for each of the etudes. And there would be one judge in each room. So that means there was one judge listening to scales all day. There was one judge listening to sight reading all day. At least I assume that it was just one person. The upside is that it's just you and the judge in one room. So you're not standing up in front of 120 of your peers trying to play a Karg Eilert etude, which doesn't really mean anything unless you're a flute player. But a sophomore trying to play a Karg Eilert etude in front of 100 other people, some of which are all state level players, like, no wonder you would get nervous. You know? I know for me, I did get nervous for auditions like that when I was in high school. I mean, heck, I still get nervous for auditions today, you know? So if I was a high schooler in Texas right now, and on a normal year, I would have to stand up and play in front of at least 30 other flutes, if not like 100 other flutes, I don't think I would have made it. I don't think I would have made it into a group, honestly. It's cutthroat, really. And I think they just try to make it as efficient as possible, but to the detriment of the experience of the kids sometimes, I think. Yeah, so I guess to sum it up, I, as an adult, looking back on it, I do think that the way that they were doing the district band auditions in Illinois when I was in high school made more sense and made for more of a test of the whole musician. Yeah, and not just like, can you play this Karg Eilert etude in F sharp major at 150 beats per minute? Like, because some kids can do that, but they can't play their F sharp major scale at 150 beats per minute. You know? So, like, what are we testing them on? I don't know. There's so many things. There's so many things. But in my opinion, I do prefer how they were doing it in Illinois better for me. I hope that makes sense. I hope that was coherent enough. Next up, I've got a question from, ooh, Lord, girls, I hope I'm saying your last name right. Kiara, is it Eijo? I think it's Eijo. Please tell me if I'm saying it wrong. Kiara Eijo, who is a flutist in Florida, and she has a twin sister, Karina Eijo, also in Florida, and she also plays the flute. So this is super cute. Both of them have submitted questions for this episode for today. Kiara asked, what was your experience at DePaul like? And I could go like, this is one of those things where like I could have an entire episode on this by itself, but I am just going to give you a little taste of it for today. I have to start out by saying never in my wildest dreams did I think I was actually going to get into DePaul University, let alone get in with really good scholarships. I was definitely the bottom of the barrel when I got there. Like, there were 7 or 8 freshman flutes that they accepted that year, which was a really big class for them. And I was definitely at the bottom of all of them. All 8 of us. One of my most formative teachers, Mary Stolper, what a lady. She saw something in me. She saw something, and she wanted me to be there. And I'm so grateful. As a freshman, pretty much everyone gets placed in the large concert band. It's called Wind Symphony. All these band programs, they have different names for their groups. So pretty much all of us played in the large wind band. I played in that band, I think, for 2 years. Because one thing that's cool about DePaul is that you can get rotated into other ensembles during the quarter. DePaul's on quarters. So if you, like, for instance, you're a freshman, everyone goes into the Wind Symphony, but you had a good audition, you would register for both the Wind Symphony and then also whatever other group that you were placed in for that quarter. So just because you were in the large concert band, it didn't mean that you would also have the opportunity to play in the chamber orchestra that term, for instance. And you were also in at least one chamber music group. Well, probably one thing that is unique about DePaul's music program is that there isn't a music theory course and there isn't a separate music history course. They are taught together in one class, and it's called musicianship. So as you work through the various periods of music, you are learning the history and the cultural context alongside the music theory and the performance practice of that time, which is a very interesting way to do it, I think, because otherwise you have to require kids have 2 separate classes, right? And then you've also got ear training. And then it's also required to take group piano. Because I had a lot of piano experience, I didn't have to take group piano until I think I only had to take it for 1 quarter. It was like the very last quarter. The professor in charge of the piano program, she just wanted me to take it for like the music theory aspects of it, because there's a lot of like chord progressions and stuff like that I actually didn't have a lot of knowledge of from my piano lessons. let's see, what else was unique about my time at DePaul? I have to talk about all of my different flute teachers. Because I think usually when one chooses a school to go to, your private lesson instructor is such a huge part of that decision, right? In many ways, I was very lucky that I got to learn from many different flutists at my time at DePaul. I didn't have one teacher for really more than 1 year and like a quarter at a time. My freshman year, my teacher was Jennifer Klippert, who I believe now I think she's still on faculty at University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee, I want to say. Hi, Jennifer, if you're listening. But Jennifer left DePaul at the end of my freshman year, which was a little bit of a shock because like the program that all 8 of us freshmen signed up for was learning from Jennifer Klippert for 2 years. And then after you do your petition to major, you study with Mary Stolper. Being told that Jennifer Klippert was leaving was kind of a shock. But at that time, the school had hired Elise Johnson, who is the piccolo player for the Lyric Opera of Chicago. She had been hired on to be a chamber music coach, and so she was coaching the freshman flute quartet at that time. And lo and behold, Elise was going to take Jennifer's position. So at least like we had already worked with Elise and liked her and like knew what she was about before Jennifer left. So my freshman year, I studied with Jennifer Klippert. My sophomore year, I studied with Elise Johnson, which, oh my God, Elise Johnson is like the piccolo audition queen. She's so good. She's fabulous. If you don't know who Elise Johnson is, look her up. She really doesn't do a ton other than play with the Lyric Opera of Chicago and teach at the university, but she is really good at what she does. And so then after sophomore year, passed the petition to major by the skin of my teeth. And then junior year started studying with Mary Stolper, which, if I remember correctly, not everyone got to move up to Mary at that point because Mary was fixing to retire from teaching at DePaul. My senior year was Mary Stolper's last year teaching at DePaul. So I got to study with Mary my junior year, and then the first quarter of my senior year before they hired Mark Sparks to kind of replace both Mary and Mathieu Dufour at the time, because my senior year was when Mathieu Dufour, the principal flutist of the Chicago Symphony and on faculty at DePaul, he taught like the artist diploma students or performer certificate, whatever you want to call it. That was when Mathieu Dufour left Chicago for Berlin, which was another big shock to us anyways, and to his students, because at that time he actually had like a handful of flute students at the university. I remember like my freshman and sophomore year, he only had a couple. But that year he had more, like a lot more than usual. So I remember when that announcement was made that he was leaving, all of his students were just completely really down about it and trying to figure out what they were going to do, if they were going to go to Berlin to follow him, or if they were even going to stay at DePaul, or if they were going to go home. So Mary was getting ready to retire, and Mathieu left at the same time. So that was the year that they brought in Mark Sparks, who's the principal flute of the St. Louis Symphony. Is it the symphony or the orchestra? I always forget. So my second quarter of my senior year, which is when I was auditioning for grad school. That was my first experience with Mark Sparks. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he's still doing it this way. He lives in St. Louis, and then he comes up to Chicago every other week to teach. So if you're taking lessons with him, you only see him every other week, but it's every other week for 2 whole hours, which is a long lesson, right? So that was kind of intense. And then same thing, I think he was also doing some chamber music coaching. So yeah, it would be really intense when he was there, and he would run studio class as well. But I was very, very fortunate that I was given that opportunity to be literally one of his first students at DePaul. I didn't really have any choice in the matter, and he didn't really have any choice over me. I think it was just like Mary just kind of like forked over her favorite students, like, here, fix them, or like teach, like enlighten them, you know? And I'll tell you what, it was enlightening. Mark Sparks is, he's fantastic. You can learn so much just by standing next to him while he's playing. It's really incredible. And I did get into grad school. I mean, like, I was prepared for auditions before he had started, but he helped me a lot with my Mozart and my Bach. Those are two composers that he's very passionate about. And I got into grad school. Got really good deals getting into grad school too. It was a hard decision to make, so I'm really lucky that I had that opportunity to study with him. And then that spring quarter, because most of Met Two de Four students left, I was also assigned to play principal flute with the DePaul Symphony Orchestra for their spring gala performance. So I got to play principal on Brahms 1 at Symphony Center, which is to this day a highlight of my career as someone who did not ever end up getting into Civic, and that was the one time that I got to perform at Symphony Center, was to play Brahms 1. I will remember it forever. Yeah, that's pretty much my experience at DePaul in a nutshell. I know it's kind of flute heavy, but I hope that kind of answers your question. Kiara also asked about my evolution of my flutes, like how many instruments I've had through the years. You know, when I started in Maryland, they start beginner band in 5th grade in elementary school. So I started off on a closed hole Yamaha, which nowadays the trend is to actually start off kids on an open hole instrument and just leave all the plugs in so that they don't have to pay for a step-up instrument as soon. I do think that is the better way to do it because I grew out of that instrument very quickly. And then I think by the time I was in 8th grade, my parents bought me a Jupiter by Altus. It was a Di Medici, so that was like a step-up model. Still have it. It's in my closet somewhere. It was a good flute. And then that flute carried me all the way until my senior year of high school, when I was getting ready for auditions for college, right? And my flute teacher had like put a bug in my parents' ear before the school year started that I was really going to need a better instrument if I was going to do the studying music in college thing. I remember our initial budget being under $10,000 for that like pre-professional model flute. Ended up busting that budget. The flute that chose me was the Powell Aramite with the gold on the inside, which is a wonderful flute. I still have that one also. I need to sell it, but it's a great instrument. That flute served me very well. But after 1 year at DePaul, I was kind of overplaying it already. So I upgraded head joints, and I upgraded to a Nagahara 16K gold with a platinum extended riser. So that was a lot heavier, a lot darker. It took all of the air I was putting into the instrument. And that was a wonderful combination. Also, that flute, like that head joint on that body, did really well. I had to do some finagling to get that head joint on there, but it works really well together. I need to sell that head joint as well. And then that flute carried me through grad school. But then by the end of my master's, I was like, it was not working for me. And I needed a body that could take more air. So upgraded again, and found that my Nagahara gold head joint with the platinum riser worked really well on the Burkhart 595 flute, which is 5% platinum, 95% sterling. Still was able to get like some darkness from the gold and the platinum on the head joint, but that flute was very zippy sound to it. Takes fast air for sure, but that was a great combination as well until I moved down to Texas. And man, I don't know if it's the humidity or if like because I had taken so much time off and like completely like reworked how I play, if like that flute, that setup was just not doing it for me anymore. It was after my first year of teaching down here. Gosh, the coronavirus has really like messed up my timeline a little bit. So after my first year of teaching, I was like, this is not my forever flute. This is not going to be it. And so then my family and I made the decision, like, if we're going to find my forever flute, like, we got to do it right. I mean, like, granted, the flute that I currently have might not be my forever flute, you know, like tastes change, the way that people play change. I might not want it anymore. I might not want to have a solid gold flute when I'm older because it's really heavy. I might not want to have to use that much air anymore when I'm older, you know. But if we were going to do it, we were going to do it right. And made an appointment with Flutistry, and Adam Workman is a perfect angel and was so incredibly helpful and knowledgeable through the whole process. Not a sponsor, but man, if you're a flutist and you need some guidance on finding the flute that's right for you, you really do want to go check out Flutistry and at least talk to them. They're really excellent at what they do up there, for sure. And so now I have basically like my dream flute. It is a 14K rose gold Powell body, gold keys, and a Manca platinum head joint with a rose gold lip plate and a 18K yellow gold riser. So, or no, not a riser, crown, excuse me. So there's a lot going on there. And I owe my parents a lot of money, essentially. That's how I was able to fund all of those flute purchases. So I need to sell the flutes that I no longer use. If you are interested in trying out my Powell Aramite or my Burkhart 595 with the Nagahara head joint, feel free to let me know. We can work something out. You can get a trial with them. But they gotta go. Karina Eijo, Kiara's twin sister, also flutist, she asked me, what do you love about your setup? What led you to pick the instrument that you have? And I will say, like, through the process with Flutistry, like, I could really do an entire separate episode just on, like, the flute hunting process with Flutistry. But my Burkhart, at the end of the day, was just not taking the air that I wanted to use. And I constantly had leaks. I had keys that were blowing open, and not wanting to stay put. Might have something to do with the humidity as well down here. I'm really not sure, but it was in the shop with quite a lot of frequency, more than you would expect for an instrument of that price. That whole time when I was struggling with my sound with that flute, I was beating myself up like, oh my God, like, you're down here teaching flute to these kids and you sound terrible. Like, you're not even qualified to be teaching flute. You don't sound like you're a good flute teacher. And all of that is just imposter syndrome talking, right? In hindsight, when I went to flutistry, I wanted to be in really, really good shape. Obviously, I wanted to be in awesome shape so that I could play literally any flute that I wanted to try, right? And not be limited because I'm out of shape. So I was practicing regularly, not like a lot, just like 2 hours a day, most days, Got to Boston the first day that we went out to try flutes. We went to Brannan, and one of the first flutes that I tried was the all platinum Brannan with the rose gold keys and a Lafin head joint. And I remember I had tried a platinum flute at the NFA convention in Minneapolis a few years prior, and that thing was just like so heavy, and it took so much air, and it did not sound good when I played it. But then a few years removed, and completely rehashing how I play and having really good cardiovascular strength, I guess, I picked up that platinum flute, and I was like, there's no way this is going to sound good, because the last time I played a platinum flute, it sounded terrible. And I surprised myself that I was able to make that thing actually sound good and use enough air and make it sparkle. And I cried, because that whole time I thought it was me. I thought that I sucked. And the flute that I was playing on just wasn't the right fit for me. Lord knows I'm not trying to spend over $100,000 on a platinum flute. But it was like, for me, that was a huge part of the process, is recognizing that I was being limited by the hardware that I had, and that I was capable of more if I had the right tools. And I think that's part of the beauty of what flutistry does. I love my flute because the platinum in the head joint gives it a really crisp response to the articulation, and I'm able to have a really nice, sparkly high register, and also a really rich, dark, low register. And the pitch is excellent. I don't have anything but good things to say about it. I love my flute. I also love the C-sharp trill key. If you're not a C-sharp trill key person, all of my flutes have C-sharp trill keys. I love it. I'm obsessed. I would recommend it. Paula Mims, who is another Texas flutist. She is up in Fort Worth, I believe. Paula asked me, what do you do when a student literally refuses to practice? It's a 7th grader. And I will say I don't have like a ton of experience with this, because I've been very blessed that all of my long-term students are really excellent, devoted students, and they always practice, which is great. Usually the ones who don't practice are the ones that end up quitting. sometimes when a kid's not practicing, it's because they don't know how to practice. They haven't been taught how to practice. So I will literally spend a whole lesson practicing with them and showing them how to practice and what to do. After that, if they're still not coming prepared to their lessons, I would give them a way to quantify their practice. Like, okay, you have to be able to play this line accurately with the metronome 5 times. And we're going to put tick marks for every time that you play it correctly. If you play it incorrectly, it doesn't count. And so then each line on their lesson that day has 5 tick marks next to it. Kind of same thing that I do with the scale challenge that I'm doing with my kids, which I got from my high school flute teacher. You have to play each of your major scales 100 times accurately with the metronome. That's another way to just like get them to practice. I will say that sometimes if a kid comes to a lesson and they're not prepared, it's not that they didn't practice, it's that they didn't practice what I assigned them. They might have practiced what their band director assigned them, and they might have gone on YouTube that week and found a video that taught them how to play the theme song from their favorite video game, and they practiced that instead. Or instead of physically picking up the flute, they spent time, like they went down a rabbit hole of Sousa marches. And they listened to like 20 different Sousa marches that week, but they didn't practice that much. I really think it kind of depends on the student. Obviously, each person is different. But I also think that if a kid is consistently not practicing, like a certain part of me is like, well, I mean, if I've done everything that I can do and they're still not excited to practice, then it's just not for them. You know, one more thing that I think is important for us all to remember is that like we're living in the 21st century, and there are so many great apps out there for ear training and note recognition and rhythm training. Like if you're having a hard time getting kids motivated to practice flute, they might be more motivated to practice these kind of things on an app on their phone, and they don't even realize that they're learning as they're playing. These apps, I mean, they cost a few bucks, you know, so you just got to get the parents on board with paying for it. But it's a great resource, and I think sometimes we forget that the App Store is there. So I would also suggest maybe checking out some of those types of things as well. I'm sorry, I can't be more helpful on that one. And there definitely were a whole bunch more excellent questions. Many of them are going to show up later in the show as their own independent episodes. So if you did not hear your question answered today and you didn't hear your name on the air, I'm sorry, but I promise you will get your question answered later on. Just stay tuned, keep listening, and I'll keep y'all informed as that goes. So we're into March now, right? Which means we're 1 month closer to April, which means we're 1 month closer to your federal taxes being due. And lucky me, I'm engaged to a CPA, certified personal accountant. That's what that stands for. So he just like does everyone's taxes. That's what he does for a living. He also does my taxes. Unfortunately, he's like over his head with work right now because it's tax season. But the next episode that airs on March 16th, I'm going to be sharing with you some of my insights about paying your taxes as a musician that I was not taught in school, did not learn about until I started dating an accountant. So, as always, please take my advice with a grain of salt. I am not a certified personal accountant, but I can help you out a little bit if you are one of those people that tends to get a little overwhelmed with their taxes, or if you're just trying to figure out ways to save some money when that time rolls around. So I think that will be an episode for everyone. I think everyone can probably stand to learn some things from that next episode. So stay tuned for that one. Okay. And I think that's all I have for today. I hope that you didn't get bored listening to my voice for as long as you have, if you made it this far. Don't forget that I'm not going to be doing another Q&A episode like this again. This is going to be like one unique episode. If you have more questions for me, and you want to like be able to pick my brain, make sure that you go to Patreon and sign up to be part of the exclusive Unclassical Musicians Patreon community. Every dollar that is contributed on there goes towards the production of this show. Every week I sit down and I produce this show by myself. It takes hours, and those are hours that I am currently not getting paid for. So if you have been enjoying the material and you find value in this material and you would like to contribute to make sure that this show keeps on going, I would be ever so grateful. Thank you so much. Please consider it. I appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the happy ukulele music. We'll see you next week.